Some time back, I received, in the name of our country, the bodies of 4 Marines who had died while on active duty. I said then that there is a special sadness that accompanies the death of a serviceman, for we're never quite good enough to them. Not really, we can't be, because what they gave us is beyond our powers to repay. And so when a serviceman dies, it's a tear in the fabric, a break in the whole, and all we can do is remember. It is, in a way, an odd thing to honor those who died in defense of our country, in defense of us, in wars far away. The imagination plays a trick. We see these soldiers in our mind as old and wise. We see them as something like the founding fathers, grave and gray-haired. But most of them were boys when they died, and they gave up 2 lives, the one they were living and the one they would have lived. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up their chance to be revered old men. They gave up everything for our country, for us. We owe them a debt we can never repay. All we can do is remember them and what they did and why they had to be brave for us.
To all those who have paid the ultimate price for our freedom, we say thank you. Hello everyone, and welcome to this special Memorial Day edition of the BENGEBUSTER Show, coming to you from the studios in Lake Norman, North Carolina. I want to take this special time and do a special podcast for all of our fallen veterans of the wars past. They pay the ultimate price for all of us to be able to live our dreams and be able to live safe with our families, go to our jobs we love and or maybe not love. But just to be able to be free, and we're free thanks to the men and women who paid the ultimate price. And the BENGEBUSTER Show and myself would just love to right now take this time to thank all the ones that have gave that ultimate price for our freedom, and also thank the families of those victims too. You know, our hearts go out to people that have lost loved ones in wars, and maybe not during war, but lose them after war from the after effects of war. So we want to say thank you, and so I want to dedicate this show to those fallen victims, and I also this show is going to be dedicated to my cousin Michael James Benge. Mike did not pass away in a war, but Mike did serve in the Vietnam War, and he gave over half of his life to the military, and I just want to say thank you to my cousin for doing that. And so I want to dedicate this show to him, and I'm going to tell you a lot about him. And you might ask, this is a wrestling podcast, so why are you doing a Memorial Day show? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because had it not been for my cousin Mike, I probably would have never got into wrestling. I mean, he's the one that pushed me to do it. He always told me from the time I was a little kid, and he and I would talk about wrestling. I'd say, cuz I'd like to be a wrestler, but I know I never can. He said, "What? You can't say you can't because you've already defeated yourself." He said, "For one, you're a binge, and binges don't quit. binges aren't losers, and if that's your dream, then you're going to fulfill that dream. He told me that when I was very young, probably 10 or 12 years old. And so as the years go by, I get a little older, and I guess I'm about 18, 19 years old. And I tell him, I said, hey, cuz, I got this opportunity to go to a wrestling school and train to be a wrestler. He's like, and he was just so excited, like more excited than it seemed like than I was. It was really funny, but he's like, well, I'm going to drive you there. I'm going to go with you. I'm like, well, I don't know if they'll let, people in the building that aren't training. He goes, I don't care. I'll sit in the parking lot. And he did that. I can't tell you how many weeks that he drove me to wrestling camp. Him and his son James, and they would come along with me, and they would sit in the parking lot while I was training. And then once the doors opened for the show, they would come in, and Mike would always get on the front row. And let me tell you something: if you had never been to a wrestling show that my cousin Mike wasn't sitting in the crowd, then you totally missed out on the best time ever. I mean, Mike was so over with the boys because they the guys in the back would be like, hey, the guy on the front row, that's the guy that you need to work. And I'm like, and I tell him, I said, you might not want to do that, because anything you got to say to him, he's going to have a better comeback, and he's going to make you look stupid. So you don't want to joust with Mike. But of course they would, and of course, like always, Mike would make them look stupid, and I'd sit in the back and laugh. But Mike didn't do it to be mean. Mike did it because he was trying to help the show out, help the boys out, help get people over, and he really helped me a lot. And going back to my days in wrestling school, I would go and I'd get beat up and I'd get disgusted, and I'd come back to him and I'd say, Mike, I don't think I'm going back next week. He goes, oh, you're going back. If I got to put you in the car and drive and tie you up till we get there, you're going. So Mike, thank you for pushing me and seeing something to me that I didn't see. Mike believed in me more than I believed in myself, and that right there is pretty. It says a lot about him and his character and the love for his family. I mean, anybody that knew Mike, he adored his family. He adored his kids. He adored his grandkids, his sisters and his nephews and nieces, and everything in between, and uncles and aunts. And even though Mike and I were several years apart, I think probably 18, 19 years apart, and he was my cousin, but he was more like my brother. I mean, I'm an only child and no brothers or sisters. My parents just had me, and they couldn't take any more. Nah, just joking. But yeah, Mike was like a brother to me. He was always there for me anytime I needed him. And he had me in his wedding, and that was a good time. And but getting back to the wrestling, I'm going to wrestling school and I'm learning, and I'm wanting to quit, and he's not letting me. And I'm like, well, I can't quit. He's gonna make me go anyway. So off I went, and I'm glad he did that, because he saw something in me that I didn't see, and so but I'm sitting there one day and I'm like, God, Mike, I said, I don't know what I'm gonna call myself. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I all these wrestlers have names, but I don't have a name. I'm just Tony Benge. And he goes, well, that's a good name. He goes, but you're right. You need a gimmick. And at that time, I didn't really know what gimmicks were, but I guess eventually in the wrestling school, the promoter started hearing how Mike was, so he started letting Mike come in on the training. So Mike was like learning stuff too, and he told me, he says, you need a gimmick. You got to have a gimmick. And I was like, okay. I said, well, I don't know a gimmick. He goes, well, let's see. He said, who's your favorite wrestler? And I'm like, well, my favorite wrestler is, I got a lot of them. He goes, but who's the one wrestler that you look at and go, man, I said, well, probably Beautiful Bobby Eaton at the Midnight Express. I like, the way he wrestles and the things he does. He goes, well, there you go. He's like, that's going to be your name. I said, I can't be Beautiful Bobby. There's already He goes, no. He said, if Bobby's beautiful, then you're terrific. And I said, Terrific Tony. He says, yeah. He goes, it sounds good already. Just listen to it. And so therefore, Mike gave me the nickname Terrific Tony, and I still use that name to this day. I've never changed it, and I've always been, for a long time I was just Terrific Tony, but then as the years went by, I started using my whole name, Terrific Tony Benge. And so the Terrific Tony came from my cousin Mike. And again, Mike, thank you. But it was so cool. And from that moment on, that was probably 1992, 93, when I started. And so anyway, as the years went by, it didn't matter how much I saw him, or every time I'd see him, or he, he'd call my dad. He'd be like, "Hey, when's Tony's next wrestling match? Because I'm coming." And he always came. I mean, he came to a lot of my matches, and like I said, if it wasn't for Mike, I probably wouldn't have stuck with the wrestling, because I would have gave up. And because I'm one of those kind of people, if I don't get it right away, I just give up and I don't keep on. But Mike pushed me, and Mike, he gave me a strong work ethic, and I really appreciated that. And then years later, I'm still wrestling, but Mike gives me a call one day, and he's like, "Hey, I'm a manager for this rent-to-own store, and I want you to come work for me." And I'm like, "Rent-to-own, Mike? I don't want to do that." He goes, "Oh, Tony, you'll make really good money, and it's fun." He goes, "And the best part, you get to work with me." I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, sounds like a deal." So I went there and done my interview, and they hired me, and for the next 10 or 11 months working there, maybe a year, me and Mike were known as the Benge Boys. And word on the street was, if the Benge Boys came knocking, they were taking your stuff. And Mike was, but it goes back to Mike's background. Mike was a 6-year Marine Corps. He served in the Vietnam War, and then after that, he re-enlisted in the Army for another 10 years. So Mike gave 16 years of his life to the military, and of course to America. And during that time as a Marine, I mean, I'm sure that really put that really put in a strong work ethic for Mike. And Mike didn't know the word no. The word no didn't exist with Mike. If you told Mike you couldn't do something, he would show you he could do it. And unfortunately, for those unfortunate souls that didn't pay their bill on their television or their bedroom suit or whatever you had, or what have you, Mike was coming to get it. If Mike knocked on your door, you had two choices. You could either let him in the door to get your stuff, or he was going to sit in your driveway until you got mad enough to come out and say, "All right, just come get this stuff." And I saw it happen so many times. And one of the funny things, funny story, I remember we had went into this neighborhood up in Greensboro, North Carolina, and it wasn't a good neighborhood by far. And I said, "Mike, this is not a place that we should be." He goes, "This lady owes us, she's been owing us for 2 months." And he goes, "I'm not going to court. She's going to give us this stuff today." Well, lo and behold, when we pulled up, there was people out cutting her grass, and so she was out on the porch. And so Mike finally called her, and he's like, "Okay," he said, "you got to give up your stuff." He says, "I'm not coming back. If I come back, I'm bringing the law," and blah, 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 blah. Long story short, and mind you, we're driving a van, not a cube truck, not a long bit, but a van, like a 15-passenger van with no seats in it, just a shell van. And in that van, Mike and I say just Mike because he just told me put this here, put that there, but we end up getting 2 bedroom suits, 2 mattress and 2 box springs, queen beds, 4 nightstands, 2 dressers, 2 mirrors, a television, and I think maybe a washing machine or a dryer. I can't remember which. But I'm like, "Mike, there's no way we'll get all this stuff in the van." He said, "It's going in the van, and we're going to get it in there, and because this lady has owed us enough, and she's going to pay, and she's going to give us our stuff back." And he goes, "And on top of it, I'm a Benge, and Benges don't quit." I'm like, "Okay." So we got everything in there, and we ended up having to tie everything to tie the mattresses to the roof. And then we get it, and then Mike, we go to leave. Got everything in there, even though I didn't think we could. He got it. So we're leaving the neighborhood, and he's driving, taking a long way out. I'm like, "Mike, where you going? That lady might, He's like, "Because I'm going to drive through this neighborhood to let everybody know that if you don't pay, the Binge Boys is getting your stuff. And I just thought that was so cool that he just didn't quit. And Mike was just such an amazing human being. I mean, if you didn't get to know Mike, you missed out on Mike. I mean, you really missed out. You could be having the worst day possible. You could be down the dumps, and I promise you, 10 minutes around Mike, and he would have you crying, laughing at his jokes or just the way he would talk and his personality. I mean, Mike was so good, and I just miss him so much. And I want to do this little podcast and on Memorial Day and about, make it about him and kind of tie it to wrestling too, because he was always at the shows. He loved wrestling. When we was kids, we'd go to wrestling, and I think at one time when he was in the Army and he was based in Alabama, he used to go to a lot of wrestling matches because he used to show me pictures where he went there so much that the wrestlers knew him, and they would like let him take pictures with their belts, and he'd always had ringside seats, and he'd take James to it, his son James, and he showed me his pictures, and I was like, man, that is so cool. But Mike was just an awesome guy, and like I said, he adored his family, and I just want to say thank you, Mike, and I want to say thank you to his two children, James and Sandy, for letting me do this podcast on Mike, and in a remembrance of him. I have a ring jacket that I have a patch on there that says in memory of Mike, and I wear that jacket to the ring, and I know that Mike's there with me every time I take it off. I wear it to the ring, and I just want to say thank you to James and Sandy for sharing your dad with me over the years. I really appreciate that, and I love you guys. And again, I just want to say thank you to all of our troops and police that put their lives on the line daily for us. Folks, if you're out and about and you see a police officer or a military in the restaurant with you, buy them a drink, buy them dinner, show them how much you appreciate them, thank them for their service, and just that'll help the world go around. And just want to thank all my listeners, and make sure you tune in this Thursday for a new edition of the BengeBuster Show.